Hello and welcome. This is Matthias 76, and together we are decoding the headlines. I have a story that I want to talk about today. We've been talking about vaccines, talking about COVID-19, talking about vaccines more, and something else crossed my desk. It piqued my attention, and so we're going to talk about this story. So this piece is from CBS News, and the title seems just informative, fairly innocuous. NASA predicts a wobble in the moon's orbit may lead to record flooding on Earth. Good information to have, but let's go deeper and see where this story is really coming from, because the mainstream media, the big names especially, CBS News being one of them, they don't put a story out there that, like this unless they are driving an agenda, unless they're working as part of the plan. And what we're going to see today is that this plan, this agenda, is tied together with Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, all under the umbrella of weather modification and weather control. With that, we'll be talking again about the Hegelian state. Get used to that phrase. If you come to understand it, you'll be able to decipher things, decode things, and see exactly where it is leading. So I'm switching over here to my PDF version of this story. I save it as a PDF. That way I can annotate it and do away with all the fluff and nonsense from the website. But the opening line in this story is, every coast in the U.S. is facing rapidly increasing high tide floods thanks to a wobble in the moon's orbit working in tandem with climate change-fueled rising sea levels. Now, one of these things is legitimate. It is the wobble in the moon's orbit. It's a normal thing. Tells you later in the story, it happens on an 18.6 year cycle. As a result of that, it causes tides to both high tides to increase as well as low tides to be even all the more lower. It is a normal and natural thing. What they're throwing into this is climate change-fueled rising sea levels to plant the idea, terror on every side. The coasts are going to be flooded. Oh, what will we do? So first of all, out the gate, you have to understand this. They control the weather. Whatever climate change is going on has nothing to do with your SUV or my SUV. It has to do with what they do to alter the weather, to change the weather, to control and direct it. And if you don't think that that's possible, if you hear that and it goes through your head, that's just absolute insanity, then you need to dig in and do some research. If there's one thing you have to understand in coming to grips with the evil agenda that is at work in this world, is that it's a bad idea about anything that you hear to ever say that couldn't be. There's no way that could be. Don't say that. Say, wow, that's odd. I've never heard that before. Or, hey, that sounds crazy, but maybe I ought to dig deeper and find out if these things are so. So I'm going to direct you to a couple of places. The first stop in learning about weather modification is this website. I will put the link below, but it's pretty straightforward. Weather Modification History. It's a site run by Jim Lee. And what he does, he has an archive with all of the stories, all of the data pertaining to the history of weather modification. He has a section that is all of the patents on technology for changing, altering, controlling, modifying The weather, you can go through and look at all of it. It is an extensive website, an amazing work. Go to weathermodificationhistory.com. The next site to check out is Climate Viewer News, another Jim Lee website. And when you go to this website, many of the fancier parts of the website down here are a little bit dated. He's not keeping this up the way he used to as far as this fancy format of the website. But right here, he has scrolling news that you can go and look at stories that are pertaining to the weather, things going on there. Jim Lee also has a YouTube page. There he's putting stuff out all the time. The most recent story from 3 days ago. But you need to spend a little bit of time getting up to speed on the reality that they do control and modify the weather. It is extensive. It is expansive in its scope. So back to where we began with this story. NASA predicts wobble in the moon's orbit may lead to record flooding on Earth. They control the weather. They use that control of the weather to create the scenarios that they want to have come to be. Case in point, from the article, they expect the flooding to significantly damage infrastructure and displace communities. Number one, that is exactly what they want to happen. Why? Because it serves a bigger agenda. We'll get to that bigger agenda. Number two, this information comes from NASA. And here's my simple thing with NASA. It's like politicians and what Will Rogers said about them. How do you know when NASA is lying? Well, their lips are moving. Don't forget that NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratories were started up, run by some of the most evil people who have ever existed. Operation Paperclip brought a bunch of Nazi scientists over here, and many of them, rocket scientists, Nazis, were the backbone of NASA. The Jet Propulsion Laboratories were started up by Jack Parsons, who was the lead disciple of Anton LaVey, who was the disciple of Aleister Crowley. He's a Satanist. He's a Satanist. They went out in the desert and did sex magic rituals and believed that they opened up a portal for other entities to come here. And that place, guess what it's called? Area 51. So I don't trust information from NASA. I know I have to sift through it and see what it is they're trying to lead me to believe. And it is all part of a bigger agenda. So why would they want to control the weather? First of all, there is no power trip quite like controlling the weather when it comes to being God-like. You can steer hurricanes, you can create them, you can feed them, you can park them right where they want. And we've seen that over the past so many years. Hurricanes that just stop in one place like they never have before and just stay there, pounding places like Houston and flooding it out. Why? Because they can. But there is more to it than that. It's more than just playing God. They're playing God with the aim and intent of changing everything that you know. And for that, we need to go to our next data point. And so we land here, transforming our world, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This from the wonderful people at the United Nations. The United Nations approved Agenda 21 in 1992. It went back to 178 different countries, and they then approved it. United States being one of them, the Holy See in Rome, translate the Vatican, being another. Every developed country in the world signed on to this thing. Agenda 21 was first, and Agenda 2030 is simply an update. I'll say this. We'll just talk about Agenda 2030. Everybody talks about Agenda 21. Everybody talks about Agenda 2030. Chances are, if you're watching this channel, you've heard of Agenda 21. You've heard of Agenda 2030. I'm going to give you a challenge. You need to do this. If you have not gone out and read them, all you have to do is Google Agenda 2030 PDF. Boom. It's right there. You can download it from the United Nations website. If you have not gone out and read this document, and it is expansive, it goes on and on and on, and it's not fun to read. If you haven't gone out and read it, you need to do that. Because when you do, you will find what I found. When I went through, I read it, I studied it, I made notes, I've been back and read it and studied it again. This is the blueprint for total control of the world. It is exactly what it is. Whenever you hear sustainable development, what you need to, it's like affordable health care. It's Orwellian doublespeak. It's like government intelligence. It's Orwellian doublespeak. It's like justice system. It's not a justice system. It's an injustice system. All of these titles are misleading. When it says sustainable development, and it's all through the document, what they mean by sustainable is we have total control. We've seized it all. We've inventoried it all. Every single aspect, every single thing, every resource, every person, every government, healthcare, everything, we have inventoried it and we control it. That's why it's sustainable. Now, to make that point all the more clear, I'm going to play an excerpt from this video. It is a video with Rosa Koire. She is an expert. She is the expert on Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 and the agenda that they are driving with that. She has a book. I highly recommend it. It's called Behind the Green Mask. You can get it on Amazon. But I want to play this excerpt from this video, and she's going to explain exactly what sustainable means and what it is that with Agenda 2030 fully in place, they intend to implement.
What I would ask is, and I know you get asked this a lot, can you summarize for people Agenda 21, when it began, and just the level of pervasiveness now, all of these agendas, all of these policies that all our countries and politicians have signed up without our knowledge, and ultimately where this is leading for the 21st century?
Mm-hmm. Well, that certainly is a lot to talk about, and I will sum it up
in 30 words or less.
Right. Okay. My pleasure. All right. So here's what United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, is a real plan. It is a conspiracy, but it is not a theory. It's a conspiracy fact. It was agreed to. It is a United Nations plan. Agreed to in 1992 by 178 nations, including Ireland, the United States, all the UK, and 178 nations plus the Holy See. It is the comprehensive blueprint. It's the action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all energy, all education, all law enforcement, all food production, all information, and all human beings in the world. It is a totally comprehensive plan. It's a completely pervasive plan. It is the plan to inventory and to control everything on the planet, including you. And it was agreed to. Now, when you, of course, if you look at my videos or anything about United Nations Agenda 21, you're going to see this pop up from Wikipedia. The first thing it says is it is it's a voluntary, non-binding plan. Yes, that is true. It was a voluntary, non-binding plan with the United Nations, but it was brought back into your country by your federal governments. and agreed to by your government to implement in your country.
That is why it is sustainable. They intend to control every last aspect of life, of existence, of this world. And if we have to take you away from the rural places where you live, where we can't control you, and bring you into the cities in stack and pack housing, which they try to make look neat. Wow, you can live in a tiny space. Isn't that great? Again, Rosa Koire on why they want to get us into densely populated cities.
Yeah, that's right. So the plan is designed to take you out of the rural and suburban areas and put you into the dense city centers where you can be more easily managed, controlled, and surveilled. And I definitely want to talk about Sidewalk Labs, Quayside, and Toronto in a minute. What I do want to say is that this plan is a plan for totalitarian control. And you don't just do that overnight in the world. In order to do that, you use, of course, all totalitarian states share the same characteristics. They need terror. They use the vision of the glorious future, and of course, austerity and scarcity in the moment. And of course, that's what you see with 9/11. You saw terror with the climate change issue. It's about terror, and of course, COVID. And so this is the implementation of the surveillance state.
They want you in the cities. They want us all in the cities. There they can control you. There they can monitor you. There they can watch your every move. There you have no say. You are beholden to them. That is what Agenda 21 and the updated Agenda 2030 are about. And go out. I'll put the link to where the document is in the description below. Go out and read it. Force yourself to read the whole thing. I remember when I read Agenda 21, I kept putting in the margins. I was writing. I was on my tablet. How do they think they're going to do this? Who do they think they are? Well, in the intervening time, I've come to understand full well how they think they're going to do this and who they think they are. They believe they are the masters. And what they are doing, and this keeps coming up again and again, and I don't say it because it's the only thing that I have to talk about. It ties in with everything. They are statists. Statists. They believe that the state is everything, and they get that philosophy from this wonderful gentleman. His name is Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. And what he believes is there on the screen. The state is the absolute reality, and the individual himself has objective existence, truth, and morality only in his capacity as a member of the state. You only matter if you're serving the state. He goes so far as to say this: the march of God in history is the cause of the existence of the states. Their foundation is the power of reason realizing itself as will. And when he says that, he's not referring to Romans 13:1 that says that all the authority that has been established was established by God. He's not talking about that God. He believes the state itself is God. And what happened? What happened is that the Illuminati, the elites who were headed up, I believe, in the United States by Skull and Bones, founded by guys who went to Germany and studied under the major apostles of guess whom? Hegel. And they founded Skull and Bones, and Skull and Bones is the overarching power to be in this country for quite some time. George H.W. Bush, Skull and Bones. George W. Bush, Skull and Bones. Prescott Bush, Skull and Bones. John Kerry, Skull and Bones. Both on the left and on the right, because the left-right paradigm is made up for our control. It's all part of the Hegelian dialectic. How do you take over the world? How do you manage to get everyone to yield to your control, to be willing to be the little bitty cog within that big collective that is the state? You use conflict. You use terror. You use disaster. One of the things you use is weather modification and control so that you flood out the coastlands so that you can get everybody to move into the cities. Out there in California, I've got a series of videos on the California fires from a couple years ago. Out there in California, all those fires raged through. And then do you know what happened? There was no follow-up on it. There certainly was not. But what happened was when the people who lived there went to go back and build again, to rebuild their own homes on their own properties, the regulations, the environmental regulations, and every other kind of regulation were so onerous, so expensive, that they couldn't afford to do it. So they had to sell their land for, guess what? Pennies on the dollar. Those fires were quite intentional. Go watch my videos on that if you want to. I'll put a link to the playlist down below. But you create a disaster, and then you come up with the thesis and an antithesis, two sides of it, but ultimately it's all aimed at getting the people exactly where you want them, in the safety, so-called, the safety of the stack and pack cities that they have prepared for you. All of these different things serve the state. So they use terrorism to drive people toward the state. They use the drug epidemic to drive people toward the state as being the solution. War to the state for being the solution. Pollution to the state for being the solution. Poverty and the debt crisis that will come. Remember, the banks are not your friends. They exist to enslave you in debt. And then they can flip the switch and create an economic meltdown. And guess what? You're saddled with debt, and everyone else is saddled with debt. No one has work, and all of a sudden everyone is dependent on, guess what? The state. They are all statists, and it doesn't matter whether they're labeled with an L or a C, liberal, conservative, a D or an R, Democrat or Republican. They're all playing the same game. They're all marching in the same direction, and they play two different sides of it in order to get us to conclude exactly what they always intended for us to conclude. And to the point, I mentioned Skull and Bones as being the major player in this country, and I believe most certainly that it is. If you read Anthony Sutton's book on Skull and Bones, I believe you will conclude the same thing. To make the point that they play both sides, guess who else, for those who are a little bit older and remember, guess who else was Skull and Bones? Let's try William F. Buckley, the man put out there, the well-spoken, articulate man with a vocabulary everyone envied, put out there by all the major news media for how long as being the voice of reasoned conservatism. He was one of them. So, back to our story. NASA predicts a wobble in the moon's orbit may lead to record flooding on Earth. It's NASA, and we should not trust them. They are a big part of this agenda driving us in the same direction. And from that article, in 2019, NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, actually remembered what the acronym stood for. NOAA reported more than 600 such floods. Scientists expect 3 to 4 times that amount in the mid-2030s after sea level rise has another decade to progress. Another one of their tactics, they set you up ready to be afraid in advance, just like they did with SARS and swine flu and bird flu, all that stuff, in advance, getting you ready to be afraid. I expect to be afraid when this next horrible pandemic comes along. And make no mistake, COVID-19, the vaccine madness, and everything pertaining to that also feeds into this statist agenda of total control. As is my practice, everything that I have referenced, there will be links in the description below, and I encourage you, don't just take my word for it. Go and do the research yourself. Take the time, learn and understand, and share this news with others. That's how the word gets out. I want to thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful, then please give us a thumbs up. And if you give us a thumbs up, please also subscribe. And when you subscribe, make sure and hit that notification bell so you're made aware when we put out new content. And finally, share this video with others. We have to spread the word. This is Matthias 76. Together, we have decoded the headlines. Together, we are working to decode the deception. God bless, and have a great day. That concludes our broadcast for today. We publish our videos on YouTube, BitChute, and Brighteon. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give us a like or a thumbs up. We invite you to subscribe so you can continue to receive our content. Also, please consider sharing this video with others. We love to hear from you, so please leave a comment below. This is Matthias 76, and together we will continue to decode the deception.